The Ukrainian military, fighting the much larger Russian invasion force, has been able to kill hundreds of Russian tanks and armored vehicles using a handheld anti-tank missile supplied by US, according to a US journalist who has been tracking the war in the East European nation. At least 280 Russian armored vehicles have been destroyed, with the American Jevelin missile out of 300 shots fired, journalist Jack Murphy said in an article quoting a U.S. Special Operations official. The Jevelin, made jointly by Raytheon Missiles and Defense and Lockheed Martin, follow a flight path that hits targets from the top, where the armor is relatively weaker. Almost every tank armor is thicker on the sides, but the top is known to be weaker, and that is where the Jevelin missile strikes. The Jevelin can also be fired in a straight flight path mode if needed. The first shipment of Javelins arrived in Ukraine in 2018. The weapon systems, along with a training and sustainment block, called the Total Package Approach, totaling somewhere around $75 million, Mr. Murphy wrote in the article. As the Russians learned that Ukraine now had Javelins, their T-72 tanks in Donbass became less aggressive and pulled further back from the front lines, he said, quoting U.S. military officials. A single soldier can carry and operate the Javelin, though more hands would be needed to carry extra launch tubes. When Russian armored columns entered urban areas in Ukraine, their tanks became more vulnerable to Javelin hits if they didn't have infantry support. Ukrainian forces equipped with Javelins would hide and move quicker, as they didn't have a chance in a direct tank versus tank fight on open ground because of the sheer numbers the Russians possess. However, the numbers of tanks killed by Ukrainian soldiers with the Javelin or other anti-tank weapons are difficult to take seriously. Mostly appearing on social media, these numbers are likely to be exaggerated by the Ukrainians and downplayed by the Russians. The usual fog of war makes it even more difficult to ascertain accurate numbers, Mr. Murphy wrote. Three days after the Russian invasion started in Ukraine, U.S. President Joe Biden had instructed U.S. State Department to release up to an additional $350 million worth of weapons from U.S. stocks to Ukraine, which had been asking for the anti-tank Javelin and anti-aircraft Stinger missiles. More than a dozen photos and videos have been published on social media of modern Russian combat vehicles which have been hit by the Ukrainian military or simply stuck in the mud. The most modern Russian tank also did not escape the fate and got caught in Ukrainian soil and mud. In an intelligence update on Thursday morning, the UK Ministry of Defense said the Russian tanks had made little discernible progress in over 3 days and remained more than 30 kilometers from Kyiv. Images circulating online show Russian tanks and missile systems defeated by the country's muddy terrain and abandoned by the troops. Other images appear to show Russians placing trees under the vehicle's wheels to keep them out of the sludge. Once the snow begins to melt in spring, the fields in Ukraine become like a quagmire, and travel on unpaved roads or across the country becomes very difficult. Trent Tilenko, a former auditor for U.S. Defense Contract Management Agency, told The Telegraph that the wet and boggy weather experienced in spring and autumn makes cross-country movement extremely difficult, as well as the Rasputitsa, a Russian word referring to both the weather and road conditions. At these times, bad tire maintenance, vehicle overcrowding, and lack of fuel have isolated most of this Russian army column from its rear, Mr. Tilenko said. The Telegraph reported that Russian ground forces are not performing in the way they believed they would, how they previously trained, or how they would pride themselves to be. A Western official told the publication that the enormously large traffic jam was partly the result of damaged or destroyed vehicles blocking the road, presenting Russia with a real problem passing logistics forward to enable that force to actually move at pace. They said the force has not really made any significant progress now for a number of days. Referring to the Russian army's wider report setbacks in Ukraine, the official said, "If you're looking for the highlight example of poor planning and poor execution, that convoy sat where it is and is a really good example." According to the report, Ukrainian counterattacks are reported to have pushed the front line further away from Kyiv in towns to the west of the capital, which have seen heavy fighting over the past few days. The Western officials said that Ukrainian troops have shown their ability to fight ferociously and exist for a long period of time in austere conditions.